This is the Zemar Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch Zemar.
So there's this big push about transparency, and transparency really needs data, especially in the business world, right? In order to be more transparent, there's got to be more information, and that's data. And so just to reference things with data, I'm going to just reference a couple movies that hopefully you've seen. If not, take note of these. But old school one, Short Circuit, that's with that Johnny Five, the robot. He gets lost and, he's trying to figure out the new world, but he needs input. So he keeps talking about need input, and then he's reading things and capturing things, and he gets better. It's all about data. There's another really cool movie called Real Steel. It's a robotic boxing movie. Instead of fighters going in the ring, they're putting their robots. And there was this one guy that won a lot of their matches, or most, and it's because he was using AI and collecting data again, and actually overpowering the competition because they started to learn their moves and calculating them. And of course, until there's grit, but we need input, right? And so a lot of people say, well, we already have technology and automation, and there's all these distractions. It's definitely a little bit different. The technology and the distractions I always refer to as like being in the gym for 8 hours, right? And so at some point you become unproductive, right? You could have all the data in the world all day long. It's just not always the right stuff, and you spend too much time and it doesn't get anywhere. That's what I call gym rats, right? You're there all the time, you're being noticed, but you're not really getting the results. Why? Because we don't have the right information. So once we learn more, we can be more impactful, not only in gym, but we can do it in business. So we become more productive, we have better results, and then even better than that, we have purpose-driven results. There's times when we use wrong data too. And one example of that everybody probably could relate to is COVID, right? And so the CDC, initially used inaccurate data, then they changed it and modified it over time. And I'm not really here to talk about facts or opinions based on COVID. I'm just saying that the information data kept changing, we kept moving with it, and a lot of times we can all agree that at some point there was inaccurate facts and data that we were using to try to get by with COVID, and it just didn't really pan out. If hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it does, then, we'll be a little bit more prepared and obviously have the experience and past data that actually may be more successful. So when I was in the military, I worked on aviation electronics. We fixed the boxes in the fighter jets and almost any airplane that was out there. I wasn't on the flight deck during normal operations. We were only there to have fun or sightsee, but we worked in air-conditioned shops. So we had to fix these boxes. So the squadrons would say, hey, this roll, pitch, and yaw computer is bad, or this, heads-up display is bad, or whatever it might be. And our job is to kind of fix it. But, the world of technology has changed so much that it's a lot of monkey see, monkey do. We hook it up to a computer. The computer really does the troubleshooting. I'm not sure if I'm for or against that necessarily. It's made our job a lot easier, which means you can have less skilled people doing the troubleshooting. But obviously, when it comes back to old school stuff, that's when good things happen, right? When I was out there, and I told the story before, where we had 7 out of 8 airplanes down, and we ended up getting them back up, but we had to do things differently, right? It wasn't by hooking up to a computer and let the computer tell us, But sometimes even with the computer, it still gives us false information, right, from the box, just the way it's testing, right? And that's what the computer is computing. And so, you may never fix one box because you didn't try to produce new data or look at different things from a different angle and collect new information. And so sometimes we had to trick it to get the data that was there or change the data to see if the results changed. And then if the results change, we have something to work with, and then we tried to troubleshoot that. And then a lot of times we had success with it. It didn't always work. So even though we produced a different outcome, we're right back to the drawing board again. there's many different ways we did this, but in summary, I mean, there's so many different ways that we troubleshoot this, and anybody that tries to solve problems, they attack it from different angles. But we actually tried to run circuit boards from another box that was identical, the exact same, just different serial number on the box, but uses the same parts. And we used that and moved them over one by one to see if the fault moves. Sometimes we would just remove the card entirely and let it run with an empty spot, right? So inside the boxes, they were like bookshelves that had these circuit boards in there. You could take one of the boards out and you could run the test. Well, sometimes it fails right away because it already notices it, but in other cases it doesn't. And so it produces a different outcome, which gives us new data that we can work with. And then that may produce the end result of, because now we have new information, accurate information, closer to where we need to be. But again, some of that's intuition, but and that's why in the business world we hire consultants that have been through it, because we haven't. A show that I just love on TV that they don't have anymore, but it's called House MD. I'm sure some listeners have seen it. It's great, and I just like a lot of the storylines that go into it, but especially how often he would force an output, right? So in a patient, and sure they're dealing with patients, and sure it's a show, and maybe some of it's exaggerated, but I'm just talking about the broad sense where he's got this whiteboard. And he's talking to other physicians and saying, like, here's what we got. How do we evaluate what's there? And if it doesn't come out, because that's why there's a show and there's this diagnostic department that figures it out because nobody else can. They try to figure out different outputs, right? So they sometimes force the change, get new data, maybe test for something else, maybe even add conditions or subtract conditions that weren't even there, right? So you have to change it. And the same goes with the business world. Sometimes you just have to really be creative. So even though it's a show, it faces real life. And in and outside the hospital, as well as inside the business, we need this data, right? We need the right data. But sometimes we have to figure out where the source is coming from and figure out if we need a different source, manipulate the source, or just look at it from a different angle. According to CFO.com, though, 9 in 10 finance leaders that they interviewed and surveyed, most of these were companies with at least 500 employees or more, and most of them were at least management title or executives. But they only make the decision off of bad data. So like we're talking about 89% is the actual number of CFOs that are making a decision based on inaccurate or incomplete data on a monthly basis. Meanwhile, using that data, only 25% of them are confident enough to make decisions 1 year out, predicting outcomes, right? And so how in the world can you take a world that uses regular finance data and make decisions when you know that most of it's bad anyways? And how do you make predictions off of that? And now you move to the benefits world, and I would say most plans, if you're a 500 employee base on payroll or less, most of the companies in America are still on a fully insured platform, which provide at this moment in time, and I'm going to talk briefly about more data with these companies, but they don't provide enough data. So or at all for that matter. And so you're trying to make decisions. First off, we're talking about that most CFOs already realize that they're dealing with bad data. But try making decisions when you have no data. And for years or decades, we've been going by this. And somehow you're able to make decisions and you have nothing to go by. So just imagine running a company without any financials, no profits, no loss statements. You have no idea which direction you're headed. You're only limiting what you could actually really do. And so when it comes to health plans and their renewals, it's no different, right? But now we have no data, just like if you had no P&Ls. Sure, the broker may come back and say, hey, I'm going to do my job, quote, if you could see my finger quotes, we're going to work and keep negotiating with the insurance company and shave off a couple of the points at the renewal, just on your behalf. I'm going to tell them you're a good client of mine and see what they could do. Well, they know brokers are going to do this, so they already padded that in there. We just don't know. We don't have the transparency to actually know what that margin really is. And sure, we could do it as well. Like in our firm, it's not like we don't go back and ask for better rates. We most certainly do, because I feel that the insurance companies are being dishonest with us, and we have to hold them accountable by asking them what those numbers are. It's not like this game where I'm doing it to try to earn my commissions. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, it's a waste of time for everybody's time to go back and forth. So the broker goes back and forth, negotiates a better renewal on your behalf, but you still have little to go by, right? In a lot of cases, because we deal with self-funded plans, that we have data, so we get the claims report. I discuss it with the employer or the CFO, and then or my team does, and we kind of figure out a cost analysis based on that report. And then we go back to the carrier and with data, our summary notes from our meeting, and say, hey, we review this. This is what we're seeing, and we'll ask them to shave some more points off. So now we have data to go by. We're in a lot of plans out there, and if you're listening to this, is probably in a position where you don't get that data. But every year is always the same thing. So it's kind of like trying to use an expired coupon upon checkout. You might get lucky and you may not, right? So, but you're hedging your bet on this coupon that you probably forgot about, and you're trying to use it even though it's expired, and you're hedging your bet on that. So how do you take a budget, with no data, right, and try to plan for the future, yet you have no information on it? It's one of the top 3 expense items, and you literally are playing a guessing game when it comes to the renewal. The insurance company may win. It's like poker, right? And so you got one card, they got a card, and who's going to drop the card and win, right? And I would say most of the time it's not you. But how do you do that? How does a company build up a business and have a budget, or forced budget, should I say, of possibly millions of dollars a year in expenditures related to a benefits plan? And then upon renewal, you have no leverage. You have no data to go by. And if you're on a level funded or self-funded plan, level fundeds are self-funded, you're probably reviewing the data inaccurate. Most employers and brokers don't review the data correctly. And so how are you leveraging this, right? And so, and most likely you're probably using it a little bit, maybe, all right? It depends on the involvement of the broker, your CFO, whoever's in charge of finances there. It could still be the owner. It could be an office manager, whoever is in charge of that finances. Have you, really gone through that expense report and find out what you're actually looking at? But some things are going to change here shortly, and some stuff we do know and some stuff we don't know. It's the same thing when the Affordable Care Act came out, and you had the ACA mandate, and then you had reporting requirements, and you had the Cadillac tax, and brokers had commission disclosures, like all that, and then somehow it just ironed out and worked out okay. But I know the industry has really got a pulse on this, and is really concerned about some of the businesses out there, and especially the under 50 employee market. So listen in for sure. So we got this Consolidated Appropriations Act, and there's a gag clause document that's going to be going out, and it's supposed to be start, even though it was signed in 2020, so we're 3 years in the making now, but it officially goes into effect December 31st, 2023. So 2024 is going to be the first rollout. Insurance companies are now going to provide data that you're able to make more better decisions on, whether it's fully insured or not. And so it is required by law. Now, we haven't seen anything necessarily. In fact, this morning before our recording, I sent a message to a friend of mine, a fellow veteran, that is really like knee deep in the mud on this stuff, and asked him if he had seen it. I have not heard back, but maybe we'll get him on, or have some examples. But I don't think anybody's really seen what this report actually looks like. And then with this report provided to the employers, now the employers now have a bigger fiduciary responsibility related to the group plan, and otherwise you're penalized. And what does that really mean, right? So there's still things to be had out there, and we don't know what we don't know yet. There's a lot of things we already know, so it's not like I'm saying that this is thing new, and brokers are not going to know what's going on. So the ones that have been paying attention, we got a pretty good handle of what we're expecting. employers are going to look at this data and they won't know what to do with it. But let's just say they say, okay, all right, I got new information now. This is what Butch has been talking about for a while, so I have it now. Now what do I do with it, right? Well, you have to document your responsibility of actually analyzing the data. What did you do? How did you intake it? What was the output? What did you do to make sure that you're have a reasonable coverage at a reasonable cost? What are you doing to actually do that? That's what needs to be documented, so the employer is responsible for that. If you're not doing that in that manner or in a manner that's required by law, then you're going to be penalized per employee, and that's going to be pretty hefty. So some small employers, they're getting out of the game. They're just saying, you know what? If they're under 50, there is no employer mandate. Guess what? We're going to just dissolve this. You're on your own. We're going to set up maybe a direct primary care that you can go to the facility and no cost, so you can provide employees access to health care, and you pay for that as an employer, and then let everybody else go onto the marketplace and get their own plan, right? And just call it a day. And that'll be fine for a lot of them. And maybe they should, because now they're out of the health insurance game. Maybe set up some type of reimbursement on some of the employees because they're not going to qualify or shouldn't qualify, or you don't want them to qualify, so you want to compensate, but you just don't want to be responsible for that group health insurance plan. And I guess some people are saying, why do we get to this point, right? And so just like a lot of other things, when things get out of control, the government has to step in. And so for years, decades, employers and brokers were not doing their job. And so now they just basically put them on the hook to do their job. But with this new data, it forces the look at things differently. It could be completely dissolving the plan and looking at that angle. Or you could say, I can never move upstream and get into a self-funded plan, because a lot of employers can't, maybe for underwriting reasons. Or who knows, right? There's multiple reasons why we can't move to that market. So now all of a sudden I got data on plans that I never had before. Now I can make different decisions and hold possibly the insurance company responsible for some of these administrative fees or how they're allocating the funds, like all this stuff that never been disclosed before. I think insurance companies are going to have a hard time with this initially. I think they're going to make more money in the long run, because that's what the Affordable Care Act did, and don't expect anything different now. They'll figure out a way to make money off of it, and then make it big. But obviously the goal is to make better outcomes, right? And so on the podcast here, we talk about building plans that become more predictable so that you could look past 12 months, right? So like the CFO.com report, only 25% can confidently look past the year. Well, this will help increase that confident level. And so the only thing that will probably happen next is that you're going to kick yourself for not having this information and rolling up your sleeves sooner, because you're going to realize how much you were overcharged.